It took exactly 12 minutes for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to realize she'd brought a gender studies degree to an economics fight. She should have known something was wrong the moment she walked onto the CNN stage and saw Senator John Kennedy sitting there with that smile. The one that looks friendly until you realize it's the same expression a cat gets right before it presents you with a dead mouse. He had a legal pad in front of him covered in notes, a stack of documents to his right, and a coffee cup that said, "I hearts capitalism," that he'd clearly brought from home just to make a point. The town hall was CNN's idea. Economic policies debate the future of America's economy. They called it one representative from each perspective. AOC representing the progressive left's vision of democratic socialism. Kennedy representing fiscal conservatism with a Southern draw. The audience was split evenly. Half young progressive activists who'd taken the day off from their nonprofit jobs, half older conservatives who'd been paying taxes since before AOC was born. The moderator, Jake Tapper, looked nervous. He should have been. The first question was softballs about inflation. AOC launched into her standard spiel about corporate greed, price gouging, and how billionaires were stealing from working families. She had all her talking points, the ones that played well on TikTok and got thousands of retweets. The progressive side of the audience applauded enthusiastically. Then Kennedy leaned forward and that smile got a little wider. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez," he said in that slow Louisiana drawl that makes every word sound like it's being served with sweet tea. "That's all real interesting. But before we get too deep into this, I wonder if you could help me with something. I'm just a simple country lawyer. Well, senator now, but I'm having trouble following your explanation. Could you do me a favor and define inflation for me? Just so we're all working with the same understanding." AOC blinked. "Inflation is when prices go up because of corporate greed." "No, ma'am." Kennedy interrupted gently. "That's what you think causes inflation. I'm asking you to define what inflation actually is. You know the economic definition. You have an economics degree from Boston University, so I'm sure you learned this." The trap was set. AOC didn't see it yet. What happened next became the most viral political debate moment since Biden-Palin. And if you think that's hyperbole, wait until you see the receipts. Kennedy pulled out a document from his stack, handling it with the delicacy of someone presenting evidence in court, which, given his background, made perfect sense. "Representative, you graduated from Boston University with a degree in economics. That's impressive. I went to Vanderbilt and Oxford, but I still have trouble with long division." He got a laugh from the audience. "So, I'm sure with your economics expertise, you can help educate all of us about economic policy. I'm looking forward to learning something tonight." He held up the document. "This here is your college transcript. Well, parts of it that became public record when you applied for that congressional internship back in college. Freedom of Information Act is a wonderful thing." AOC's smile faltered slightly. "Now, I see here you took Introduction to Macroeconomics your freshman year. Good start. Introduction to Microeconomics sophomore year, and then let's see one upper-level economics elective your junior year. That's it. 3 economics courses total." He looked up with exaggerated confusion. "That seems light for an economics degree, doesn't it?" He flipped through pages, "But I see you took plenty of other courses. Gender and sexuality in the modern world, intersectionality and social justice, post-colonial theory, all fascinating subjects, I'm sure, but not exactly. Economics." Kennedy pulled out another document. "This is Boston University's degree requirements for an economics major. Students need a minimum of 12 economics courses, including econometrics, advanced micro and macro theory, monetary policy, international economics. You took 3, and your degree technically is economics and international relations with heavy emphasis on the IR part." He looked at her grade report and that Introduction to Microeconomics. "That's the one where you learn about supply and demand curves, marginal cost, market equilibrium, the basics. You got a C++, ma'am." The conservative side of the audience was starting to murmur. The progressive side looked uncomfortable. "Now, I'm not saying a C+ is terrible," Kennedy continued in that aw shucks voice that somehow made everything more devastating. "Heck, I got a C+ in statistics at Vanderbilt and I still graduated. But I don't go around proposing to redesign the entire statistical system of the United States. That would be silly." AOC tried to recover. Senator economics isn't just about formulas and graphs. It's about people. It's about understanding how working families owe. I agree completely. Kennedy said, economics is absolutely about people. People who lose their jobs when politicians who got C++ES in basic economics implement policies they don't understand. But let's talk about your economics expertise after college. You became an economist, right? He waited. AOC said nothing. Oh, wait. That's right. You became a bartender, which is honest work. I respect that. My daddy owned a small business, and honest work is honest work. But Representative tending bar isn't exactly the same as working at the federal. You didn't become an economist. You didn't work in finance. You didn't even become an accountant. You poured drinks, which requires different skills. Kennedy leaned back. So you took 3 economics courses, got a C+ in the most important one, never worked a day in the economics field. And now you're proposing to restructure the entire American economy with a $93 trillion plan. Ma'am, I wouldn't let you restructure my sock drawer based on those credentials. The room erupted, half in applause, half in outrage. Tapper tried to restore order. AOC's face was red, her jaw set. She started to respond, but Kennedy wasn't quite done. And just so we're clear, Representative, I'm not making fun of bartenders. I'm making fun of bartenders who think pouring beer qualifies them to redesign capitalism. There's a difference. And folks, that was just the warm-up. Kennedy had 7 more rounds loaded. Hit that share button. After the commercial break, CNN needed time to process what was happening. Tapper tried to steer towards safer topics. Let's discuss tax policy, he said, probably thinking that was neutral ground. Kennedy perked up. Oh, good taxes. I love talking about taxes. Representative, you talk a lot about the rich paying their fair share. I agree completely. Everyone should pay what they owe. I think we can find common ground on that. So, let's talk about the Met Gala. AOC's eyes widened slightly. She knew what was coming. September 2021, Kennedy said, pulling out photos printed in glossy color. You attended the Met Gala wearing a lovely white dress with "Tax the Rich" written on it in red letters. Very striking. Made quite the statement. The dress was designed by Aurora James, a talented designer. Tickets to the Met Gala cost $35,000 each. He held up the photos so the audience could see AOC in her gown surrounded by celebrities, photographers, luxury everywhere. Now you claim the ticket was borrowed or gifted to you. The designer said you were a guest. Fine. Wonderful. But here's where my simple country lawyer brain gets confused. Kennedy pulled out IRS documentation. The Internal Revenue Service has these pesky rules about gifts. Anything over a certain value, currently $15,000, has to be reported as income and it's taxable. He started doing math on his legal pad, writing large enough for cameras to see. Ticket price, $35,000. Designer dress, custom-made. Estimated value based on similar dresses by the same designer, $60,000 to $80,000. Professional hair and makeup, several thousand. Accessories, let's call it $5,000. We're looking at a total value of roughly $100,000 in gifts. Kennedy looked up. Now, Representative, on your financial disclosure forms for 2021, which are public record for members of Congress, I don't see any reporting of these gifts. The tax liability on $100,000 of income at your tax bracket would be roughly $35,000 to $40,000. Did you pay taxes on this gift? Silence. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Kennedy continued. You wore a "Tax the Rich" dress to a $35,000 per plate party where you rubbed elbows with millionaires and billionaires. You received approximately $100,000 in free goods and services, and you didn't pay taxes on any of it. He set down his pen. Ma'am, that's not political protest. That's tax evasion with better fashion sense. AOC found her voice. The dress was borrowed for the event. It was returned afterward. It wasn't a gift in the traditional sense. The ticket wasn't returned, Kennedy interrupted. The makeup wasn't returned. The experience of attending wasn't returned. And even if the dress was returned, you still received the benefit of wearing an $80,000 dress for an evening. The IRS doesn't care if you gave it back. You receive value. That's income. He pulled out more documentation. I asked some tax attorneys about this. Real smart folks, not C-plus students. They said that if you borrowed a $100,000 item for personal use, even temporarily, the IRS considers that a taxable benefit. Sort of like how if your employer loaned you a luxury car for a weekend, that's taxable compensation. Kennedy smiled that dangerous smile again. But I suppose when you're making a statement about taxing the rich, you don't actually have to pay taxes yourself. Rules for thee, but not for me, as they say. That's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Hypocritical. Is that too strong? No, I think that's exactly right. The conservative side was loving it. The progressive side looked like they'd been slapped. AOC tried to respond, tried to pivot to broader issues of wealth inequality, but Kennedy had already moved on to his next exhibit. Oh, and one more thing, he said casually. You know who knows about tax law and gifts and benefits economists? Real ones who got better than C pluses. But I'm sure you meant well. But wait, there's more. Kennedy wasn't even close to done. Keep watching. Tapper tried desperately to change the subject. Senator Kennedy, let's discuss job creation and economic development. Perfect. Kennedy practically bounced in his seat. Let's talk about Amazon. Representative, you're from New York's 14th District. You famously helped kill the Amazon HQ tour deal that was coming to Queens. I remember because you celebrated it like you'd won the Super Bowl. Let's talk about that triumph. AOC straightened. This was her territory, or so she thought. That deal was corporate welfare. We were going to give $3 billion to the richest man in the world. Stop right there. Kennedy held up his hand. That sentence right there. That's where we need to have a teaching moment, because that sentence reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how economics works. A misunderstanding that cost your constituents 25,000 jobs. He pulled out a breakdown of the Amazon deal. Amazon was planning to build HQ2 in Long Island City, Queens. They projected 25 to 40,000 jobs over the next decade. Average salary, $150,000 a year. The state and city offered $3 billion in tax incentives over 10 years. Kennedy looked at the camera. Now, everyone watching at home, I want you to understand something. Tax incentives are not cash. Representative Ocasio-Cortez genuinely thought that New York was writing Amazon a $3 billion check. She thought there was $3 billion sitting in a bank account that could be spent on schools or subways or whatever else. He turned back to AOC. But that's not how it works, is it? Can you explain to the audience what a tax incentive actually is? AOC stumbled through an explanation about tax breaks and corporate giveaways. Kennedy let her finish, then gently corrected her like a professor with a struggling student. A tax incentive means Amazon would have paid less in taxes than they otherwise would have. The key words are than they otherwise would have. If Amazon doesn't come to New York gets zero tax dollars from Amazon. Zero. If Amazon comes to New York with incentives, New York gets some tax dollars from Amazon, just not as much as they would without incentives. Some is more than zero. He showed the economic analysis. Economists, real ones with better than C pluses, analyzed this deal. Amazon would have generated approximately $27 billion in tax revenue over 10 years. The incentives would have cost $3 billion. That's a net benefit of $24 billion. $24 billion that could have gone to schools, subways, infrastructure. Kennedy pulled out more data. But it gets worse. Those 25,000 jobs paying an average of $150,000 per year. That's $3.75 billion in annual wages just from direct Amazon employment. The indirect jobs, restaurants, dry cleaners, coffee shops, construction economists estimated another 67,000 jobs. He looked at AOC with something approaching pity. You killed 92,000 jobs because you thought tax incentives were cash. You celebrated saving $3 billion that didn't exist while losing $24 billion that would have existed. And you know what the worst part is? Kennedy pulled out a final document. Amazon still opened facilities in New York, just not in Queens, not in your district. So you didn't stop Amazon. You just stopped your constituents from getting the good jobs. Staten Island got an Amazon facility. The Bronx got one. Your district got nothing except higher unemployment. He leaned forward. Ma'am, you thought tax incentives were actual money sitting in a bank account. That's not a policy disagreement. That's not a different economic philosophy. That's failing to understand basic economics. And 25,000 families paid the price for your C++ understanding. The room was silent. Even the progressive side couldn't really defend this one. Everyone knew the Amazon deal had been a disaster for Queens. But hearing it laid out so methodically with such devastating precision made it impossible to spin. 150,000 a year isn't rich in New York City, Kennedy added quietly. That's a teacher married to a firefighter. That's 2 nurses. That's working families who could have bought homes, sent kids to college, built lives. But you called them jobs for the rich and killed them because you failed Econ 101. 3 rounds in AOC was looking nervous. Comment below if you remember this disaster. During the next break, AOC's staff was in full crisis mode. You could see them huddled in the corner, frantically scrolling through phones, probably trying to find talking points that could salvage this. Kennedy sipped his capitalism coffee and made small talk with the audience members nearby, completely relaxed. When they came back, Tapper tried a new approach. Let's discuss the Green New Deal, Representative Ocasio-Cortez signature legislation. Oh, good. I was hoping we'd get here, Kennedy interrupted. I read the Green New Deal, all 14 pages of it. Took me about 8 minutes. I've read Chinese food menus that were more detailed. He pulled out a copy printout with highlighting and notes in the margins. This is quite a document. It promises to make America carbon neutral in 10 years, guarantee jobs for everyone who wants one, provide universal health care, free college, and rebuild every single building in America. That's ambitious. Kennedy flipped through pages. What I found interesting is what's not in here. There's no cost estimate, not even a rough one. Just promises. Big, beautiful promises. So I asked some economists, again, real ones, to estimate the cost. You know what they said? He pulled out multiple studies. The American Action Forum said 51 trillion over 10 years. The Heritage Foundation said 93 trillion. Even the liberal-leaning think tanks estimated at least 40 trillion. Let's split the difference and call it 70 trillion. That's $7 trillion per year for 10 years. Kennedy wrote numbers on his legal pad again. The entire federal revenue for 202 was about $4.4 trillion. That's everything: income taxes, corporate taxes, payroll taxes, everything. Your plan costs more per year than the entire federal government collects. He looked at AOC. How do you pay for it? We'd tax billionaires. Close loopholes. Stop wasteful military spending. AOC started. Let's do the math. Kennedy interrupted. Total wealth, not income. Wealth of all American billionaires combined is approximately $4.5 trillion. If we confiscated all of it, every penny, leaving them destitute, we could fund your plan for 7 months. Then what? He continued, corporate tax loopholes close might generate $100 billion a year. Military budget is about $700 billion, and you're not actually proposing to eliminate it entirely. So we're still short about $6 trillion per year. Where's that money coming from? AOC tried to pivot to modern monetary theory, to printing money, to economic transformation. Kennedy let her talk, then destroyed each point methodically. But the money isn't even the most ridiculous part, Kennedy said. Let's talk about the logistics. Your plan promises to retrofit or rebuild every building in America to meet green standards. There are approximately 136 million buildings in America. You want to do this in 10 years. That's 3,650 days. He did the math. That means retrofitting or rebuilding 37,000 buildings per day, every day for 10 years straight, including weekends and holidays. Ma'am, there aren't enough construction workers in America to do that. There aren't enough materials. The supply chains don't exist. The training programs don't exist. Kennedy pulled out more data. You also promised to eliminate air travel and replace it with high-speed rail. The distance from New York to Los Angeles is 2,800 m. The fastest high-speed rail in the world in China goes 200 m/h. That's a 14-hour train ride. Nobody's taking a 14-hour train when they can fly in 5 hours. You're not eliminating air travel. You're eliminating business travel, tourism, and family visits. He held up a map. You need to build 30,000 m of high-speed rail in 10 years. That's 8 miles per day. China, with authoritarian government, unlimited cheap labor, and no environmental reviews, builds about 0.000 miles per year. You think America is going to build 3 times faster with union labor environmental impact statements and local zoning boards? Kennedy set down the map. Your plan requires solar panels covering an area larger than Texas, battery storage technology that doesn't exist at the scale required, a complete transformation of the transportation system, training 20 million construction workers overnight, and spending more money than exists in the federal budget. He looked directly at AOC. This isn't a policy proposal, Representative. This is a children's letter to Santa Claus. You've promised every toy in the store, but you haven't explained how Santa's going to manufacture them, deliver them, or pay for them because you don't understand economics, logistics, or reality. We have to be ambitious about climate change, AOC protested. There's ambitious and there's delusional, Kennedy said flatly. Ambitious is Kennedy going to the moon, and we had a plan for how to do it. Delusional is promising to eliminate airplanes and rebuild every building in America in 10 years with no plan for how to pay for it, no technology to do it, and no workers trained to build it. You wrote a wish list and called it legislation. Kennedy was systematically destroying her credibility. Share this with someone who needs to see it. AOC was visibly rattled now. Her responses were getting shorter, more defensive. The progressive side of the audience was quiet. The conservative side was energized. Tapper looked like he was reconsidering his career choices. Kennedy, meanwhile, was just getting started. Representative, you talk a lot about income inequality, about how the rich are getting richer while working people struggle, about how we need to redistribute wealth. I want to talk about your personal wealth. You pulled out financial disclosure forms. When you were elected in 2018, your financial disclosure showed you had about $15,000 in savings. That's it. You were living paycheck to paycheck. You said representative of the working class. Kennedy looked up. What do you drive now? AOC hesitated. I don't see how that's relevant. It's a Tesla, isn't it? Kennedy pulled out photos. Tesla Model 3. Nice car. I looked up the pricing. Base model starts around $40,000. The one you have with the features visible in these photos probably costs closer to $50,000. How do you afford that? I make a congressional salary. You make $174,000 a year, Kennedy agreed, which is a lot of money. It puts you in the top 10% of American earners. You're literally the rich you keep talking about taxing. But let's look at your expenses. You pulled out more documents. You maintain an apartment in Washington, D.C. Rent in Navy Yard, where you live, runs $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a nice place. You also maintain a residence in New York. That's expensive. You travel frequently. You wear designer clothes to events. You get professional hair and makeup for appearances. You drive a Tesla. Kennedy added it up. Your required expenses probably run $8,000 to $10,000 a month. That's $100,000 to $120,000 per year plus taxes on your salary. You're paying about $40,000 in federal and state income taxes. So out of your $174,000 salary, you're spending about $160,000 on lifestyle and taxes. That leaves about $14,000 a year for savings. Yet you went from $15,000 in savings to owning a $50,000 Tesla in a few years. He looked at her. Where'd the money come from? AOC's face went red. I'm fiscally responsible. I'm sure you are, Kennedy said. But the math doesn't add up. Unless, oh wait, he pulled out another document. Book deals, speaking fees. You wrote a book about being working ass while making $174,000 a year. That's quite the hustle. Kennedy leaned back. Here's my point, Representative. You make more money than 90% of Americans. You drive a luxury electric car. You live in expensive neighborhoods in 2 of the costliest cities in the country. You wear designer clothes. You attend exclusive events. You are rich, but you've built your entire brand on being working ass. He held up a photo of her in the Tesla. You can't be rich and pretend you're poor. You can't drive a $50,000 car and claim to represent people riding the bus. You can't make more money than 9 out of 10 Americans and call yourself working class. That's not representation. That's false advertising. I came from a working class background. AOC protested. My father was an architect. I worked as a bartender. And now you're rich. Congratulations. Kennedy's voice dripped with sarcasm. That's the American dream. Work hard, move up, make a good life. I'm happy for you. But you can't be rich and pretend you're still poor. You can't enjoy the benefits of capitalism while claiming to oppose it. Pick a lane, representative. Are you rich or are you working as? Because your Tesla says rich, but your rhetoric says poor. And you can't be both. 5 rounds, 5 destructions. But Kennedy was just getting warmed up. The audience was completely engaged now. This had stopped being a debate and turned into a public education session. Kennedy was the professor. AOC was the failing student, and everyone was taking notes. Representative, let's talk about your grandmother. Kennedy said, his tone shifting slightly. This one was more personal, and he knew it. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, you spoke often about the suffering there. You said your grandmother was living in terrible conditions, damaged roof, no snorts, power, inadequate food, and water. You were very emotional about it, very compelling. You pulled out tweets. June 2021, you tweeted about your grandmother still suffering. You blamed the Trump administration. You called it a disgrace that Americans were living in these conditions. It was moving. A lot of people were concerned. Kennedy held up news clippings. Conservative commentator Matt Walsh saw your tweets. He decided to help. He organized a GoFundMe campaign and raised over $100,000 for your grandmother. Specifically for your grandmother to fix her roof, restore power, whatever she needed. He contacted your office to arrange delivery of the funds. He looked at AOC. You refused the money. AOC started to speak. Kennedy held up a hand. Your office said it was a stunt, that it was offensive, that you didn't need help from conservatives. $100,000 in donations from regular Americans who wanted to help your grandmother, and you said no. Kennedy pulled out more articles. Then reporters went to Puerto Rico to check on your grandmother. You know what they found? The house was fine. Repairs had been done. Your grandmother was living comfortably. She told reporters she was okay, that she had family helping her. He set down the articles. So, let me get this straight. You told America your grandmother was suffering. You blamed the government. You made it a political issue. People offered to help $100,000 in actual help. And you refused it because it came from the wrong people politically. And it turned out your grandmother was fine anyway. Kennedy's voice got harder. You used your own grandmother's suffering, real or exaggerated, for political points. Then when actual help was offered, you rejected it because accepting would have been politically inconvenient. That's not advocacy, representative. That's exploitation. You turned your own grandmother into a political prop. AOC tried to defend herself. I was making a broader point about Puerto Rico. By lying about your grandmother's situation, Kennedy interrupted. By creating a crisis that didn't exist, by refusing help when it was offered. What exactly was the point, representative? Because from where I'm sitting, the point was to get attention for yourself while making your political opponents look bad. He pulled out the tweet thread again. You had a choice. Your grandmother needed help. People offered help. And you could have accepted it gracefully and said Americans of all political beliefs care about Puerto Rico. Instead, you rejected it, insulted the donors, and then it came out that the whole situation was overblown. Anyway, Kennedy looked at the camera. That tells you everything about her priorities. It's not about helping people. It's about scoring political points. It's about looking good, not doing good. The audience was gasping, but Kennedy had 2 more rounds. Comment if you're still watching. Tapper had given up trying to moderate. This was Kennedy's show now. AOC was just trying to survive. Representative, would you live in Washington, D.C.? Kennedy asked conversationally. I have an apartment in Navy Yard in a luxury apartment complex. Kennedy interrupted. Let's talk about that building. It's got a rooftop pool, fitness center, yoga studio, resident lounge, concierge service, package room, bike storage, and a parking garage. Very nice amenities. He pulled out listing prices. Rent for a 1-bedroom in your building runs about $3,000 to $4,000 a month. For a 2-bedroom, it's $4,000 to $6,000. That's expensive, but hey, you work hard. You deserve nice things. Kennedy pulled out more documents. Here's what's interesting. Your building is new construction built in 2018. Luxury development. The kind of development you've opposed in your own district. You've called luxury apartments instruments of gentrification. You said they displace working people and destroy communities, but you live in one. He showed voting records. In 2019, a similar luxury development was proposed in your district. Beautiful building waterfront amenities similar to where you live. You opposed it, said it would gentrify the neighborhood, raise rents, push out working families. The project was blocked. Kennedy looked at her. So, luxury apartments are bad in Queens, but good in D.C., or are they only bad when other people want to build them? He pulled out more information about her building. Your building has strict security. Key fob access cameras controlled entry. There are no homeless shelters nearby. The building management has lobbied against affordable housing developments in the area. You know why? Because luxury building residents don't want affordable housing next door. It might affect property values. Kennedy leaned forward. Did you speak out against that? Did you use your platform to demand your building accept affordable housing nearby? Did you insist on Section 8 vouchers being accepted? Or did you enjoy your rooftop pool in peace? Silence. There's more. Kennedy continued. Your building was built by non-UN construction workers. The development company has a history of fighting unionization. You've said every construction project should be union only, but you live in a building built by non-UN labor. That's convenient. He spread out all the documents. You live in luxury while opposing it for others. You enjoy amenities while calling them immoral. You benefit from non-UN construction while demanding unions for everyone else. You oppose affordable housing near your building while demanding it in your district. Representative, that's not socialism. That's limousine liberalism with better branding. AOC tried to defend herself. Where I live is a personal choice. It's personal until you make housing policy. Kennedy shot back. You can't live in luxury while demanding everyone else accept Section 8 housing next door. You can't enjoy a rooftop pool while calling luxury developments gentrification. You can't benefit from non-UN construction while demanding union-only labor. That's called hypocrisy, and you've mastered it. One more round. The knockout punch was coming. Kennedy took a moment, organized his final documents. This was it. The closing argument. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, let's talk about small businesses. You know, the backbone of the American economy, the engine of job creation, the place where most Americans work. How you feel about small businesses? AOC, exhausted and defensive, gave a generic answer about supporting small business and entrepreneurship. Kennedy smiled. That's interesting because your voting record tells a different story. He pulled out a comprehensive analysis. Since you entered Congress in 2019, there have been 17 bills specifically designed to help small businesses. Tax relief, regulatory reform, access to capital, pandemic assistance. You want to guess how many you voted for? He waited. AOC said nothing. 2. You voted for 2 out of 17. That's an 11% support rate for small business legislation. You opposed 15 bills designed to help the people you claim to represent. Kennedy pulled out specific examples. H.R. 1994, the Small Business Relief Act of 2020 provided targeted tax relief for businesses with under 50 employees. You voted no. H.R. 7010, the Paycheck Protection Program extension, helped small businesses keep employees during CO. You voted no. H.R. 2877, reducing regulations on small business loans. You voted no. He looked up. Why? Why would someone who claims to represent working people vote against helping small businesses? Those bills had poison pills, corporate giveaways. AOC started. They were targeted at small businesses. Kennedy interrupted. Companies under 50 employees, the bodega on the corner, the family restaurant, the local bookstore, not corporations, not billionaires, small businesses, and you voted to deny them help. He pulled out more devastating data. Let's talk about CO. During the pandemic, your district lost 3,400 small businesses. Permanently closed, gone. You know how many survived the big chains? Target stayed open. Walmart stayed open. Amazon thrived. But the small businesses, the ones that couldn't afford to weather months of closure, they died. Kennedy's voice rose. You supported the lockdowns. You supported keeping businesses closed. You opposed the relief bills that would have helped them survive. You stood by while 3,400 small businesses in your district disappeared. And you know who benefited the big corporations you claim to oppose? You pulled out economic analysis. You support a $15 federal minimum wage with no exceptions for small business. Economists across the political spectrum agree that would eliminate approximately 1.4 million jobs, mostly at small businesses. You know why? Because Walmart can afford $15 an hour. Target can afford it. Amazon already pays more than that. But the local pizza place can't. The independent bookstore can't. The family dry cleaner can't. Kennedy stood up. You've never run a business representative. You've never hired anyone. You've never made payroll. You've never stayed up at night wondering how to keep the lights on. You've never had to tell an employee you can't give them a raise because the government just raised your costs. You've never worried about regulations or taxes or competition from corporations with deeper pockets. He pointed at her. But you vote to make it harder for people who do all those things. You vote to raise their costs. You vote to increase their regulations. You vote to help their big corporate competitors. You vote against every bill that would make their lives easier. And you do it while calling yourself a champion of working people. Kennedy's voice got quiet, which made it more powerful. Small businesses aren't just statistics representative. They're the couple who took out a second mortgage to open a restaurant. They're the immigrant family running a grocery store. They're the single mom who started a cleaning business. They're the American dream in action, and your policies are killing them. You pulled out final data. Your father was a small business owner. He ran an architecture firm. He passed away when you were young, but he understood what it meant to risk everything to build something to create jobs. And somehow his daughter grew up to become the greatest threat to small business in Congress. Kennedy gathered all his documents. You've never run a business. You've never created a job. You've never made anything except speeches, but you've voted to destroy the people who do. You've supported policies that help big corporations while crushing small ones. You've opposed every effort to give small businesses a fighting chance. And you've done it all while claiming to represent the working class. He looked directly at her. Representative, the working class doesn't work for billionaires. They work for small businesses, and you're putting them out of business. Kennedy turned to the audience. A $15 minimum wage sounds great until the business closes and everyone makes $0 an hour. You know who can afford it? Amazon, Walmart, Target, the big corporations. You know who can't? The bodega on the corner, the family restaurant, the local boutique. You're not helping the working class representative. You're helping Amazon destroy its competition, and you're doing it in the name of socialism. He picked up his final document. This is data from your own district. Since you took office, small business formation is down 37%. Small business closures are up 62%. The number of people employed by small businesses in your district has dropped by 11,000. But Amazon just opened a fulfillment center. Target expanded. The chains are thriving. You've helped big corporations crush small business, and you call it progress. Kennedy walked toward AOC's position. You came here tonight to debate economics, but you can't debate something you don't understand. You got a C+ in Econ 101 and decided you were qualified to redesign the economy. You killed $25,000 jobs in your own district because you don't understand tax incentives. You proposed a $93 trillion plan with no way to pay for it. You drive a Tesla while claiming to be working class. You exploited your grandmother for political points. You live in luxury while opposing it for others. And you spent 5 years in Congress voting to destroy small businesses. He stood at the moderator's table. This wasn't a debate. This was a demonstration of what happens when someone with no expertise, no experience, and no understanding of basic economics gets power. She's not a representative. She's an influencer who stumbled into Congress with a Twitter following and a C+ in econ. Kennedy looked back at AOC one final time. Ma'am, respectfully, you're out of your depth. Stick to social media. Leave policy to people who understand math. The room exploded, half in thunderous applause, half in outraged shouts. Tapper had lost all control. Cameras were flashing. The clip was already going viral on social media. Someone had been live streaming to Twitter. AOC sat frozen her face. A mixture of shock and humiliation. Her staff rushed to her side. Kennedy calmly packed up his documents, finished his capitalism coffee, and waved to the crowd like he'd just performed a particularly satisfying legal argument, which in a way he had. The video broke every CNN viewership record. Within 2 hours, clips had 40 million views across all platforms. Within 24 hours, it was the most watched political debate moment since the Trump-Clinton encounters. But this wasn't partisan back and forth. This was systematic destruction backed by receipts. C++ in Econ trended #1 worldwide for 48 hours straight. Memes flooded social media. Conservative accounts had a field day. But more importantly, mainstream media couldn't ignore it. The evidence was too documented, the arguments too sound, the destruction too complete. CNN's own political analysts in the post-debate coverage struggled to defend AOC. Jake Tapper, to his credit, acknowledged that Representative Ocasio-Cortez appeared unprepared for the level of detail Senator Kennedy brought. That was CNN speak for she got destroyed. MSNBC tried to spin it as Republican bullying, but their own economists, when brought on to fact-check Kennedy's claims, had to admit he was largely accurate about the Amazon deal, the Green New Deal costs, and AOC's voting record. Even progressive outlets had trouble. The Young Turks tried to defend her, but spent most of their segment fact-checking Kennedy's claims and finding them true. Jacobin magazine published a piece criticizing AOC for losing the narrative and being unprepared for economic debate. The polls told the story. AOC's favorability in her district dropped 12 points in 1 week. Among voters, over 50 people who understood economics, her approval rating was at 27%. A primary challenger, a local businesswoman with an actual economics background, announced her candidacy within 3 days of the debate. The squad tried to rally around her. Rashida Clay tweeted support. Ilhan Omar called it economic terrorism, which didn't make sense, but sounded dramatic. But even progressive Democrats in Congress quietly distanced themselves. Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the debate, said she hadn't watched it, but encouraged all members to be well prepared when discussing policy. The real damage came from the policy world. AOC's Green New Deal, already struggling for support, lost its remaining co-sponsors. 3 members withdrew their names within a week. The legislation was effectively dead. Her position on the Financial Services Committee was questioned. Republicans called for her removal. Democrats quietly agreed she'd become a liability. Her speaking fees, which had commanded $25,000 per event, dried up. Universities that had been excited to book her suddenly had budget constraints. Corporate events decided to go in a different direction. The influencer-to-politician pipeline had hit a wall. But perhaps most devastating was the long-term impact on her brand. She'd built her entire image on being a fighter, a champion of working people, someone who could go toe-to-toe with anyone on economics. Kennedy had systematically destroyed that image using her own record, her own votes, her own lifestyle choices. The Kennedy's economics lesson became required viewing in business schools. Professors used it to teach critical thinking, evidence-based argument, and how to effectively debate policy. The conservative movement had found its champion in the most unlikely place, a Southern gentleman who destroyed with manners and math. 6 months later, AOC was rarely seen on national television. She'd retreated to carefully controlled social media, where she couldn't be challenged in real time. Her legislation went nowhere. Her influence waned. The influencer who'd become a congresswoman was becoming just an influencer again. And every time someone mentioned her economics degree, someone else would reply, "You mean the C+." Kennedy, meanwhile, had become a folk hero to the right and a respected voice to moderates who appreciated evidence-based argument over partisan rhetoric. His coffee cup became a bestseller proceeds to small business relief funds. His legal pad notes from the debate were auctioned for charity, raising $50,000. When asked about the debate months later, Kennedy was characteristically modest. "I just asked questions and presented facts. If that's controversial, our education system is in worse shape than I thought." But everyone who watched knew the truth. Kennedy hadn't just won a debate. He provided a masterclass in how to dismantle bad ideas with good evidence, how to expose hypocrisy with humor, and how to defend capitalism with a Southern drawl and a smile. Senator Kennedy did something remarkable that night. He exposed the difference between social media stardom and actual expertise, between virtue, signaling, and real understanding, between talking points and policy knowledge. AOC built a brand on economic populism while living like the rich she claims to oppose. She proposed trillion-dollar plans while failing basic economics. She fought for workers while killing their jobs. Kennedy didn't destroy her with insults or personal attacks. He destroyed her with math receipts and that Louisiana draw that made every devastating fact sound like friendly advice. He showed that you don't need to shout or insult to win a debate. You just need to be right, have evidence, and present it clearly. Share this with everyone who's tired of economic illiteracy from Congress. Comment below who else needs the Kennedy treatment. Because America deserves representatives who understand the policies they're proposing, not influencers who stumbled into power with a Twitter following, a C+ in econ, and absolutely no idea what they're doing. The age of style over substance is ending. The receipts always win eventually, and Senator Kennedy brought all of